So this scheme is very familiar to many of us because it is published even in the Sabbath School Quarterly. Do you see in the heading there is tohu vavohu, this expression, and do you remember that this expression actually means formless and void, or empty, formless and empty. And actually what we can see that the days of creation are designed in such a way to change this situation. So to make a form and to populate with something, so that the earth will not be anymore formless and empty, but it should have a form and it should be populated. And usually what we do is how we usually explain it. So the first 3 days, these are the days when the form is done, and the 3 days, last 3 days, these are the days when the land was filled with, and not only land, but heavens also was filled with something. Like, for example, the first day, the light was done. In the fourth day, it was like a filling. So the sun, moon, and stars were done. In the second day, the sky, or this word that Pastor Dion mentioned several times yesterday, this is the Hebrew word rakia. And it's very often translated as a firmament. But actually, today people usually, scholars usually prefer to translate it something like atmosphere. So God created rakia, and rakia is translated as firmament, something between waters and waters. So he divided waters by this rakia, or by this atmosphere. So we can assume that waters which are above were separated from the waters which were at the surface of the earth. And in this case, atmosphere was done. And the fifth day, we can see that birds, fishes, and reptiles were done. So those who can fly and those who can live in the water. And on the third day, the earth appeared. And on the sixth day, we can see that those animals and men, of course, who live on earth, were created. So this is a traditional approach to the understanding of the sixth day of creation. This parallelism, we can go even beyond, and you can see that this parallelism is really very how to say, it is there. Let me show another document to you. Just in a moment, please. So this is a repetition that we can find in the Genesis 1. There are 4 clauses that are repeated almost consistently throughout the narrative of Genesis 1. Vayomer Elohim, so, and God said, Vayhi Ken, and it was so, yes. Vayare Elohim, and God saw. Vayhi Erev, Vayhi Boker, day first, second, and so on and so forth. So what we can see here, we can see this that those phrases are repeated almost consistently throughout the narrative of the creation, week of creation. We can see the first day, so all of them are present. In the second day, one phrase is absent, and this one phrase is the sea phrase. and God saw that it was good. So only one day, there is no a phrase that God saw that it was good. And this is on the second day. On the third day, we have very interesting issue, and it is repeated on the sixth day. The same issue. Oh, excuse me. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Prof.
Yes, we can.
Because
I
somebody
think there's
is
something
writing
wrong
that.
with Pastor Mupenzi's.
Okay.
I think there's something wrong with his computer on his side. But I'd like to ask Pastor Agalo to mute his mic. I've been trying to send a message because there's some kind of air that's coming through from his side.
Okay, it looks like it is okay now. So do you see, this is the second day is the only day when the phrase and God saw that it was good doesn't occur. And on the third day, we have, and it is clearly seen on this picture, on this scheme, that do you see we have like a double creation on the third day, and we have double creation on the sixth day. So what does it mean? Like these phrases, Vayomer Elohim, Vayhi and Vayare Elohim are repeated several 2 times, and there is a final D sentence. There was evening, there was morning, day third, and the same issue we can find here on sixth day. So we can see that really this pattern 3 days are parallel to another 3 days. Okay, so that is why we can say that really 3 days, first 3 days are parallel to another 3 days of creation. And now there is a good question. So why do we not have on the second day of creation, why do we not have this phrase? And God saw that it was good. So this phrase occurs throughout all the days of creation except the second day. Do you have any ideas?
I don't understand there, because the second day it seems the phrase was not good, was not there. So I don't know what is the dash there on the fifth day.
Pardon, please come again, please.
There is also a dash on the fifth day. I don't know what is that.
Oh, this one, you mean?
Yes.
So in the fifth day, we do not have phrase, and it was like this, or it was, let me, how it is.
And it was so.
It was so, yeah. It was so.
Okay.
But we have on the fifth day, we have the phrase, and God saw that it was good.
Okay.
So probably the best way how we can explain the absence of this phrase on the second day is we need to keep in mind the purpose of creation. The purpose of creation. So everything was created for what purpose was everything created?
For God's pleasure.
Please again, please.
For God's pleasure.
For God's pleasure. Okay. But actually, what was when we speak about the earth when it was created? So what was the earth? For what purpose the earth was created?
Procreation of man. So that man could fill the earth.
Yes, so the ultimate purpose of creation to make earth a house for a man, or for humankind, for mankind. Yes, so people should live on earth. So in this case, we can assume that actually we do not have this phrase, and it was, and God saw that it was good on the second day, because on the second day, nothing was created that can profit can profit human, profit man. Because what happened during the second day? He divided water and water. So it means that people cannot live in water, people cannot live in the air, so people should live on the earth, on the dry land. And some scholars say that because of that, because nothing good for a person, for man, was done on the second day, so because of that, God didn't say that it was good for a man. Okay, maybe you can find some other solution or other explanation of this. I don't know, but as for me, it is like the best explanation. But maybe you can find something else which is better. So, what do you think about it?
I'm finding it interesting, Prof, and I know this is a stretch, but there was a conversation about the SpaceX and their project to take people to the moon. I'm not to the moon, sorry, to Mars.
To Mars, yeah.
For people to live on Mars and whatever. And of course, this is talking about the atmosphere, so it's not related directly to it. But it sparked that thought when I was looking at the verse. Yeah. But I don't have other ideas now. I'm trying to think of the flood and water coming from above and from beneath. And but that one I don't have time to develop that thought now to see if it is plausible.
Okay, one more thing that we need to discuss right now is creation ex nihilo. So this is a very common concept that we can find in theology. But I need to tell you that recently some works appeared, and recently some people started to question the existence or that this doctrine actually is present in the Bible. And I need to explain you why. So actually in the Bible, we do not have any explicit reference to this doctrine. So we cannot find anywhere in the Bible that God created from nothing. So do you understand? And the only verse that is very, very close to this idea we can find in a deuterocanonical book in the second Maccabees, chapter 7 and verse 28. So the mother says to his son, "So I urge you, my child, to look at the sky and the earth. Consider everything you see there and realize that God made it all from nothing, just as he made the human race." Yes, and actually this is if we translate it literally, it will not be from nothing, but he made it from something that was not existing, something that didn't exist, and he made it. So sometimes modern scholars even say that actually this verse and this statement cannot also support the idea of creator ex nihilo, or creation from nothing. And there are several arguments why the scholars say it doesn't support this idea. The first argument is that actually it is not a theological treatise. It is just like a parenthetical statement. The mother says to his son. So the idea of the book is not to discuss how God created this world. So that is why the context doesn't support any idea about the creation from nothing. Another very, very important issue is that in the work of Xenophon, we can find a similar statement, similar phrase in his work Memorabilia. He says like this, that the parents bring forth their children out of non-being. And the phrase out of non-being is the same phrase as occurs in the second Maccabees 7:28, out of things that not out of things that existed. And it is clear that we cannot say that children are born out of nothing. So that is why recently some scholars doubted that actually we can say that the doctrine of creation out of nothing could be based upon this statement. And furthermore, it is a deuterocanonical book. It is not a book from the Bible. So that is why it is doubtful that we can use this verse as an argument for the doctrine of creatio ex nihilo, or creation from nothing. Another argument that is used,
Prof, before you move on.
Yes, please.
I was going to say that even the statement itself says God made it all from nothing, just as he made the human race.
Yeah.
So the human race, we know, was God formed him out of the dust of the ground.
Yes.
And then he breathed into his nostrils. So making him from nothing in the context cannot mean that it was from the air, like out of nowhere. There was material that was taken, that was used.
Yeah, this is also could be an argument that you can use. Yes. Another argument that you most probably you heard this argument, and unfortunately this argument is also not valid. Some scholars say that the doctrine of creation from nothing is based on the usage of the verb bara, and bara actually means to create. And it is true that the verb bara is used only with God as a subject. So it is never used with humans. So humans or man cannot bara. Only God can bara. And sometimes scholars say that actually the nature of this verb means that when God bara, it means that he makes something out of nothing. But this issue is not true, because when we look at the occurrences of this verb, even in the first chapter of the book of Genesis, we can see that this verb is repeated 5 times. In the first verse, it is a famous verse. After that, in the verse 21, and 3 times, this verb is repeated in the verse 27. And the verse 27 actually describes the creation of man. So let me read 1:27. So God bara man in his own image. He bara him in the image of God. He bara them, male and female. So it is clear, as Pastor Postel already mentioned, that actually man man was not created out of nothing. The second chapter of the book of Genesis explains how man was created. So he was created from the dust of the earth. So he was not created out of nothing. So in this case, we cannot say that the doctrine of creation from nothing is based on this usage of the verb bara. Furthermore, recently, not recently, it's about already like more than 30 years ago, one paper was, not paper, it was a book. The book was published, and it was a research of one of the, it seems to me, I don't know, Gerhard May. I don't know where he's from Germany maybe. So he published his book on creation of nothing, and the book was Creatio ex nihilo, in the early church, something like this. And he promoted very interesting idea. He actually says that this idea of creation of nothing appeared in the church quite or relatively late. So what does it mean? So we cannot find this teaching of creation of from nothing or out of nothing in the Hebrew scriptures or rabbinic writings, but we can find it mostly in the works of the church fathers. And in this case, there is a very, very interesting question. So why did this doctrine appear in the writings of the church fathers? And Gerhard May tried to explain it, why it happened. And you remember that in the first and second century, one of the most famous heresy at that time was the heresy of Gnosticism. So do you remember what do Gnostics say? So do you remember the main ideas of Gnostics?
I think one of them is
Yep.
the separation between the body and the spirit, and the viewing of the body as evil,
Yeah.
and the spirit is as good,
Mhm.
and they are seeking to free themselves, or free men seeking to free themselves from the physical, which is evil.
Yeah.
Yeah. Of course, I mean, there were a lot of issues related to that thought, like Jesus and Christ, and how Christ did not die on the cross. It was Jesus who died, the human, but the spirit who is Christ. There was a lot of things, but I think one of the major thoughts was the separation between the body and the spirit, and that the spirit was evil. Man was good, and the body was evil, and men needed to be freed from the physical.
So do you see the Gnostics, gnosis, when we translate it from Greek, means knowledge. So Gnostics claimed that they have a special knowledge, a knowledge which is beyond what is written in the Hebrew Bible or Christian Bible, New Testament or Old Testament. And they try to explain something more that is written in the Bible. So according, they had a myth, or I don't know how to call it in a better way. So, and according to this myth, there was God, but God was so transcendent. So God is so far away from humans that actually he even doesn't have anything common with the humans, with anything else. And this God creates in a special way. So he even doesn't create, but emanates. So something is coming from him. And one of his emanation, so there was several emanations, and one of this emanation is, if I am not mistaken, there was Sophia. And Sophia had also an emanation. Sophia means wisdom. And Sophia also had an emanation from itself or herself, and it was she emanated demiurge, or demiurge. How it's translated? Demiurge, yes? And this demiurge, they consider, they believe that this demiurge is the God of the Old Testament. So the God of the Old Testament is not God, but the one who created everything was demiurge. And demiurge is described by the Gnostics as somebody very arrogant. He believed that only he is God and nobody else is God. And he created the matter, because before that, the matter has not been created. Only he created the matter. And this demiurge is opposed Jesus Christ, because Jesus Christ came from the true God. So because of this dichotomy, they actually claimed that the body and the matter is evil. Okay, do you understand? Because now we speak about some theological issues. And because the matter is evil, they believe that the body is also evil. And all these other issues that Pastor Apostle mentioned are also present. So for example, the spirit is good, but the body is evil because it was a part of matter, is made of matter. And it was produced by this demiurge who was actually not a true God, but who claimed to be the only God and who was very, very arrogant. And they made this dichotomy between the Old Testament and the New Testament. That is why most of Gnostics, they didn't recognize the Old Testament as inspired or as a part of the Bible. And do you remember there was even one very famous Gnostic, Marcion? Yes, Marcion. I don't know how it's pronounced in English well. And he even said that it is very famous that he made his own canon. And in his canon, he included only the Gospels and the writings of, not only the Gospel of Luke and the writings of Apostle Paul. And all other books of the New Testament he rejected. And it is based on the same presumptions, so that the God of the Old Testament is like an evil God. So he created a matter, and the matter is evil. So Gerhard May, in his book, promotes this idea. He says that actually the doctrine of creation of nothing appeared in the church relatively late, because this idea was born in the disputes with the Gnostics. Do you see? The Gnostics said that actually God created the matter, not God created the matter, but Demiurge created the matter. And the church fathers, and not only the church fathers, but the Christians of the first or the second century tried to oppose this idea. So what they said, that God of the Old Testament didn't create the matter, but he created out of nothing. So the matter was not created, but it was created out of nothing. So do you understand this idea of Gerhard May, of the origin of this
Yes.
doctrine of the creation from nothing?
Mhm.
And I want to tell you that this book and his idea became very, very influential. And actually, it is like, maybe it is not the only book that was written on this issue, but there were some other books, but his ideas were accepted by most of the, not by most, by many, many scholars. But I would like to ask you, do you think that this idea is completely wrong? Creation out of nothing or from nothing? Or do you think that it existed, so it could be found in the Bible?
I have a concern about it, Prof.
Yes, please.
You know, when you mentioned Genesis chapter 1, verse 27,
Mhm.
it is said that God created the man, he created them male and female. So, in this line, does it mean, you know, for example, when God created Adam, it is said that he created him from the dust,
Yes.
And also when he created Eve, he created her from the bone of Adam.
Yes.
So it's not ex nihilo because there is how can I say, there is an element from which God created those the Adam and Eve, but the verb is still bara.
Yes.
Is it correct?
Correct. Correct. So that is why we cannot say that the verb bara means creation from nothing. So we cannot build the doctrine of creation from nothing based on the usage of the verb bara.
Okay, thank
Mhm. And I just very briefly explained to you the idea of Gerhard May and how he explained the origin of the doctrine of creation from nothing. And by the way, if you read the commentary of Klaus Westermann on the book of Genesis, Klaus Westermann also, this is a German scholar, he also rejects the idea of creation from nothing, that this idea or this doctrine is a biblical doctrine. But anyway, I would like to continue my question. Do you think that this idea is completely foreign for the Bible?
Prof, my knee-jerk reaction is that it is not.
Okay.
But
Good.
I don't have strong support for it now.
Okay.
But I think of verses like Psalm 33, verse 6, that says, by the word of the Lord were the heavens made, and all the hosts of them by the breath of his mouth. And then it speaks about, for he spoke and it was done, he commanded and it stood fast in verse 9 of Psalm 33. And so this idea of the word of God creating everything. When I say that, I don't mean that everything in creation was made out of nothing, because it is clear that, for example, when God separates the firmament above and the firmament below, they already exist, but he separates them. When he calls forth the animals, the Bible says they were from the dust as well in chapter 2. It speaks about animals being formed from the dust and all of those things. So not everything, there was no, it was made from nothing. But I'm inclined to believe that in some way there are some things that were made out of nothing. But like I said, I've not developed it. That it was just a knee-jerk reaction.
Yes, I agree with you. I agree with you that actually this idea of creation from nothing, it exists in the Bible. But we cannot prove this idea by referring to the verb bara, and we cannot prove this idea by just referring only to Genesis 1. But there are some other texts which imply creation from nothing. Like, for example, Hebrew 11 and verse 3. Let us read it together. And it speaks about how everything was created. By faith, we understand that the universe was created by the word of God, so that what is seen was made from things that are not visible. So here the author says that everything was created by the word of God. And of course, this expression could be disputable, that something that is seen was made from things that are not visible, or maybe this is the way how the person say that how when Paul says that it was not, it didn't exist, maybe. Or for example, let us read Revelation chapter 4 and verse 11. Our Lord and God, you are worthy to receive glory and honor and power, because you have created all things, and by your will they exist and were created. And Psalm 148. And verse 5. Let them praise the name of the Lord, for he commanded and they were created. It is very similar what we can find in Hebrew 11 and verse 3. So God commanded and it was created. And there is a logical argument that if God is creator of everything which now exists, so it should be created out of nothing. Yes, but I just want to warn you that you should be very careful, especially if you have to argue with somebody, and somebody can say that, and somebody is, for example, opposed this doctrine of creation of nothing, and be careful about the arguments that we may use in order to prove this doctrine. So I believe that this doctrine exists in the Bible, but we need to find other arguments in order to substantiate it. Okay, do you have any questions?
Prof, can we add Psalm 33, verse 6 and 9
Again?
with the last one? No, I was saying, can we add Psalm 33, verse 6 and also verse 9?
Can you please read it?
Okay. Psalm 33, verse 6. It says, by the word of the Lord were the heavens made,
Yes.
and all the hosts of them by the breath of his mouth. And then it reads, he gathered the waters. Verse 9 says, for he spoke and it was. He commanded and it stood fast.
Yes, surely we can add this verse. Thank you very much for it.
Professor?
Yes, please.
In addition to the creation of the world, or the content of the world, we can also look at Isaiah 40 verse 26, where it says that he also created all the stars by calling them. So it's by speaking them, they exist.
Yes, thank you very much. Yeah, correct. Thank you. We can use this verse also as an argument. Okay. Any other things that you would like to add or comment or questions?
So, Prof, can we say that then that from the evidence of Scripture, it is clear that there are some things that were created out of nothing?
Yes.
And then God used some of the things that he had created to create others.
True. Yes, it's true. Now, I would like us to go to one more interesting question. So, do you see this word verb bara is used 5 times in the first chapter of the book of Genesis? And it's very important that in the 127, it is repeated 3 times. So can we explain the usage of this verb in the first chapter of the book of Genesis? So it is used in 121 and 127. So 121, it is used to describe the creation of So God created bara, the large sea creatures, and every living creature that moves and swarms in the water, according to their kinds. He also created every winged creatures according to its kind, and God saw that it was good. So creating of not animals, we cannot say animals, but all those who live in water, and the birds. And in the verse 27, 3 times this verb is used when people are created. It's very interesting to see how the original text says. Vayibra Elohim et Hataninim Hagedolim ve'et kol nefesh ha-chaya. Kol nefesh ha-chaya.
Living souls.
So before that, the nefesh, the word nefesh is not used. Yes. So before that, what God created, He created some unanimated things like dry land, like moon, stars, and sun, and also the plants. But plants, it looks like they don't have nefesh. Yeah, they are not nefesh chaya. But here we have something like. So some scholars say that this verb bara, the verb bara, is used when the creation comes to a new level. Okay, in the verse 1, it describes the creation in general. After that, there is a creation, and when creation comes to a new level, like something new that didn't exist before, like animals, or not animals, but like all something that can move. So it is a new stage of creation. And of course, when we come to the verse 27, you can see that this verb bara occurs 3 times. Bara, bara, and where is it? And bara. So 3 times bara is used. And it shows that it was again a new stage of creation. So it means that when God created a man was completely different from all other creatures that had been created before. So man is not like them. Although man could be very similar to some animals, but anyway, it is a completely new creation, and it is emphasized by usage of this verb 3 times, that this is a new stage of creation. So we can explain the usage of the verb bara in the first chapter as the reference to the new stage of creation. Any questions or any comments?
It's interesting that yeah, I think that's a very deep thought, Prof. Especially in the fact that when if God directed or led or guided Moses to choose the word bara whenever creation comes to a higher level of existence, and then when the animals are created, the word bara is used once, but then when man is created, it's not used once, it's not used twice, it's used 3 times, as if God is trying to emphasize the exalted nature of this being that he has created. And then on top of that, he even says the image of God.
Yeah.
And the image of God seems to be also repeated 3 times, because it says, let us make, and he uses asa there for make, men in our image after our likeness. So God created man in his image. In the image of God created he him, male and female created he them. So if you put it all together, the image of God is also mentioned 3 times, just to emphasize the exalted nature and the standing of men before God.
Thank you very much. Okay, so if we don't have any other questions, so let us make a break now for 10 minutes, and let us come back at 12 or 12:02. Okay.
All right, thank you, Prof.
Hello, Pastor Poswa. Pastor Sindumis. Hello, Pastor Sindumis.
Pastor Angola man,
Angola man.
stewardship director, how is Angola?
Yeah, in Angola is okay.
Okay.
But the big challenge is coronavirus.
Coronavirus is taking place there.
Yeah, coronavirus now stay in all province, and many people are infected. Yeah, is the big problem.
Sorry.
Pastor Aaron, please,
Yes.
I enter very late today because I
Yes.
have big
Internet
challenge.
problem.
Is yes, internet it's okay, but I enter and the link of Zoom have some problem. Some
Yes.
problem. I entered very late. Professor spoke something about the quiz, Moodle or other thing.
No, it's just said that some of the students has been registered in the new model. So,
Okay.
like myself, I'm not registered there. So we are waiting to see by the end of the day how it's going to handle it.
Okay, only when I conclude the register, only
Yeah.
we take a new Moodle.
Yes, they say they
Will be
have new
take.
model there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Pastor Agola, I have already added you to the Moodle, so you are there. And Pastor Aaron, I don't know why I cannot find your name in the system, but I wrote to the IT people, so I hope they will add your name very soon. Okay, our next topic is alternative views on creation. And yesterday, it seems to me, somebody raised this issue. And this is especially very, very debated issue right now, because many churches, including even the Catholic Church, Roman Catholic Church, they accepted the idea of evolution, and they tried to incorporate the idea of evolution into the church doctrines. So what kind of alternative views on creation do we have? Actually, these are three. I would like to mention some other, one more view, alternative view, which is called intelligent design. Intelligent design. What is the deistic evolution? The deistic evolution, and if you remember, deism was very popular, especially after in the end of the 18th century, when the atheism was growing and was more and more influential. The deism is a kind of a belief that God exists, but God is very, very transcendent from us humans, and he actually is not involved in our human affairs very much. So it looks like he created everything, and after that, he is not intervening in our lives. So he is somewhere very, very far away. And deistic evolution asserts that God initiated the evolution and then retreated from the universe, never to return. And this position depicts the creator as one who winds the cosmos like a clock and lets it run down without any interference. And of course, according to this point of view, the people derived from primates and so on and so forth. So it looks like God used evolution for creation, and he just initiated the process, and after that he never intervened in the process of evolution. I don't think that today there are many people who hold this idea, but theistic evolution or different forms of theistic evolution, like progressive creationism, are very, very popular today. So theistic evolution goes beyond deistic evolution in terms of God's involvement in and with his creation. God began the process by bringing the first organism to life. He then continued by working internally toward his goal for creation. At some point, however, he also acted supernaturally, intervening to modify the process, but employing already existing materials. God created the first human being, but not in doing so utilized an existing creature. God created a human soul and infused it into one of the higher primates, transforming this creature into the first human. Thus, while God specially created Adam's spiritual nature, his physical nature was a product of the process of evolution. I need to tell you that there are many, many modifications of theistic evolution, and many people just may emphasize different issues, but actually the idea is the same. So the theistic evolution, the main idea of theistic evolution, to reconcile somehow the process of creation, the idea of creation with the idea of evolution. So you know very well that one of the weakest points of evolution is the absence of the, how they call them, those links. So we don't have in evolution, there is no, in the chain of evolution, some links are missing. Like, for example, from a primate to a man. We have a lot of fossils or a lot of skeletons or other artifacts about the animals and about the man, but we don't have anything or anybody who were between. But according to the evolution, it is supposed to be. So what the theistic evolution says, that actually God intervened in order to make these issues. And what is also important about the theistic evolution, that Catholic Pope John Paul II accepted this doctrine, and on October 22, 1996, he issued a special document, and in this document he says, in his encyclical Humani Generis, my predecessor Pius XII has already affirmed that there is no conflict between evolution and the doctrine of faith regarding man and his vocation, provided that we do not lose sight of certain fixed points. Today, more than a half century after the appearance of that encyclical, some new findings lead us toward the recognition of evolution as more than a hypothesis. In fact, it is remarkable that this theory has had progressively greater influence on the spirit of the researchers following a series of discoveries in different scholarly disciplines. The convergence in the results of these independent studies, which was neither planned nor thought, constitutes in itself a significant argument in favor of the theory. And he also wrote, he rejected any theory of evolution that provides a materialistic explanation for the human soul. Theories of evolution which, because of the philosophies which inspire them, regard the spirit either as emerging from the forces of living matter or as a simple epiphenomenon of that matter, are incompatible with the truth about man. So actually what he wants to say, it looks like he agreed with the statement of theistic evolution, that man, our body is a process of evolution, but the soul was created by God. Okay, one more issue of, or one more modification of theistic evolution is progressive creationism. Progressive creationism is also sometimes called old earth creationism. So by the idea that our earth is actually very, very old. And all those theories of evolution or theistic evolution just differ from each other by the role of God in this process. So if you see in theistic evolution, God is almost not present at all. So he just started the process and he left and never come back. When we speak about the theistic evolution, they say that actually God used evolution for creation. So he created through evolution, and he intervened in some points of time. Progressive creationism says actually that God even more involved in the process of evolution. Progressive creationism sees the creative work of God as a combination.
Come again, please come again.
Yes.
Progressive creation.
Creationism, yes.
Yeah, he's saying that God is involved or never is not involved in any way or what?
He is involved even more in the in the process of evolution or in the process of creation. So
Thank
a deistic evolution says that God is not involved or almost not involved in the process. He just started and he left. Theistic evolution says that he used evolution for creation and he intervened in some points of time. Progressive creationism says that God was involved even more in the process of evolution, or I don't know, creation, because they combined both of them together. So progressive creationism sees the creative work of God as a combination of a series of de novo creative acts and an immanent or processive operation. God, at several points, rather widely separated in time, created de novo, created afresh. On those occasions, he did not make use of previous existing life, simply modifying it, while he might have brought into being something quite similar to an already existing creation. There were a number of changes, and the product of his work was a completely new creature. Between these special acts of creation, development took place through evolution. For example, it is possible that God created the first members of the horse family, and the various species of the family then developed through evolution. So what is the difference between theistic evolution and progressive creationism? So they actually say that, they, for example, say that actually God is creator. So God created everything, but he used evolution to create something. Like, for example, he can create every animal, but after that, all animals produce some varieties among their species through the evolution. So it looks like God was pushing evolution every time. Like, for example, he created something, it is developing, and the fishes should go to the dry land. So he pushed them and he created new species that could live on the dry land. And the progressive creationism actually says that it was a very, very long period of time. So they tried to reconcile the long period of time according to the evolution and the account of the book of Genesis. Yes, and they say that everything was developing through evolution. So God just intervened in some periods of time in order to make something new creation, something that didn't exist before. So do you have any questions about the progressive creationism? And one more theory, which is also very popular, especially recently, and it is called origin by design. It is not in the presentation, maybe I will include it a little bit later, but the idea is the proponents of this, it's not a theory, it is not a how to say, it is not a model of creation, but the proponents of this idea actually wants to emphasize that everything that was created, so everything is in our world, manifests the presence of the creator. Somebody, intelligent design. So when they look at everything around us, they can see a presence of intelligent design in nature, in everything. So they say it is impossible to say that everything evolved through evolution, but we can be sure that the creator is present in this world. So everything was the sign of the creator. But of course, they do not say anything else about how it was created. That is why it is like an alternative for the theory of evolution, but usually when even if you look at the Wikipedia page about the intelligent design, so most of the modern scholars do not recognize intelligent design as a scientific theory. I just want to tell a little bit more about the intelligent design. The intelligent design, the
hello,
idea of
Professor.
intelligent, yes.
I have some doubt
Yes.
in this presentation. Progressive creationism sees the creative work of God as combination of a series of the novel creative. Novel is English, please.
Okay, so shall I explain it again?
Yeah, have
Okay.
some word
Okay, I will try to explain it again.
of
So,
the
what is the
novel.
difference? What is the difference between progressive creationism and other ideas? So, do you see one of the problems of evolution is that it looks like evolution is jumping. For example, what we have fishes that live in water, and after that
Okay.
we have another creatures that live on the dry land. But according to the evolution, it was a long process. It was a long process when fishes somehow adopted to live without water. Okay.
Yes.
But
Yeah, Professor.
we do not have any creatures in between like those in the artifacts of the evolution. So it looks like it was a jump. So the evolution jumps from one stage to another stage. So what the
Okay.
progressive creationists say, that God actually pushed the evolution. For example, those fishes in the water, they were developing according to the laws of evolution. But when the time came for them to go to the dry land, God created the first animals who can live on the dry land. So God was pushing the process of evolution, and he was creating through evolution. So evolution was a tool through which he created this world.
Okay. Yeah, I clear, but in a presentation have two words, maybe in Portuguese.
Oh, de novo, it's a Latin word. It's not a...
Ah, okay, Latin.
Yeah.
Okay, okay, thank you, thank you.
That is why
so much.
those words are very familiar for you, because they very similar to your language. Yes.
Yes, yes, yes. Thank you so much.
Okay. Like a new creation. And of course, one of the main arguments of this, all these theories, because do you see, evolution is very hostile to the Bible. So they do not accept the teaching of the Bible. But these people of progressive creationism, theistic evolution, they try to somehow reconcile the story written in the Bible with what is written in the what the evolution says. And one of the key issues in this case is how can we understand the days of creation? Because according to the Bible, everything was created in 6 literal days. But according to the evolution, it took many million or billion of years. So the natural idea was for those who propone those theories to say that the days of creation are not necessarily 24 days. And for example, I will give you several quotations of several authors who defended this idea. the famous theologian of the 19th century, Charles Hodge, used to say, "It is of course admitted that taking this account," means Genesis by itself, "it would be most natural to understand the word day in its ordinary sense. But if that sense brings the Mosaic account into conflict with facts, and facts millions of years, and another sense avoids such conflict, then it is obligatory on us to adopt that other." So do you see those attempts to reconcile account of Genesis with the evolution is very, very old. Already in 19th century, it was promoted by very famous scholars. Or another scholar of the 20th century, Gleason Archer, he says like this: "From a superficial reading of Genesis 1, the impression would seem to be that the entire creative process took place in 6 24-hour days. This seems to run counter to modern scientific research, which indicates that the planet Earth was created several billion years ago." And now let us discuss those issues about the days of creation. Their main argument is that the term Yom in the Hebrew Bible could be interpreted differently from 24 hours or from just a daylight, but it could mean more than one day. It could mean just some uncertain period of time, like many, many, many years. And these are several arguments why we cannot say like this. Because, first of all, the Hebrew word Yom usually always denotes a literal day or a time of day that is opposed to night. But it can have several other meanings. But what we can say about other meanings of the day Yom, it can mean a period of time more than one day, only in case if it occurs in plural. For example, it can mean life. The Pharaoh said to Jacob, "How many are the days of the years of your life?" So if we read this verse in Hebrew, we can see that Pharaoh is just asking, how many are the days of your life? So just in this time, in this case, the word days. Okay, let me just to be precise, let me read it from the Hebrew Bible, 47:8. Vayomer Paro el Yaakov, Kama yeme shne hayecha. So if we translate it literally, how many days of years of your life? So in this case, a day, of course, is not one day, but it means a longer period of time. Or, for example, another case. Again, it is in plural in Daniel 10:14, and came to make you understand what is to happen to your people in the latter days. So in the latter days, it's again in some uncertain period of time in the future. But again, you can see that Yom is in plural. It could mean one year. For example, in 1 Samuel 1:21, the man Elkanah and all his house went up to offer to the Lord the early sacrifice. And this phrase, yearly sacrifice, if you translate it literally, would be offerings of days. Offerings of days. So in this case, one day means one, or sorry, in this case, the word days mean a year, 1 year. So, and also Yom could mean just today if it is used with the article. Hayom means most probably today, or this day, or today. But do you see, we can see one thing, that actually the word day, Yom, when it occurs in singular, always mean the 24 period of time, 24 hours period of time, or just a period of time opposite to the night. But it never means a longer period of time than this. And the longer period of time could be only when the word Yom used in plural, and it is clear. So when the word day in the Old Testament is associated with a numeral, ordinal or cardinal, it always denotes a literal day. If the word day is associated with morning and evening, it always means a literal day. The fourth commandment refers to the day in the context of the week. And of course, if we assume that day is more than 24 hours, in this case, the fourth commandment doesn't make sense at all. Yes, so we can miss it. One more thing that I would like also to emphasize, do remember this bara. Bara, we said that this word occurs several times, and it is the idea that it explains the new level of creation is emphasized also by the formula of blessing. Because you can see that the blessing is also repeated in the first day when bara is used, and the blessing is repeated again when the man was created. So we can see that the blessing and bara are used together. Yeah, Pastor Poswa, I see that you raised hand, so you wanted to ask something.
Sorry, I wanted to ask something in relation to Yom being literal. I think you said something like when Yom is used with an ordinal or cardinal numeral, it is literal.
Yeah.
And but someone can argue that in the book of Revelation, I mean Daniel, for example, Yom is used with numerals, and then would this not be problematic in that sense?
Okay. Yeah, it's a good observation.
We can say that with exceptions when the context clearly such as, I don't know. I just came with that question.
Yeah, the context is very important.
Even the next one, sorry, when it says when it is connected with evening and morning. Yes, in Genesis it does say, and the evening and the morning were the first day. But then we have the evenings and mornings used also in Daniel chapter 8 with the 2,300 evenings and mornings.
Just a minute. And so do you see when we speak about the book of Daniel, Vayomer Elai, Ad Erev Boker Alpaim Ushelosh Meot Venitzak Kodesh. And he said to him, until evening morning 2,300, and the holy is justified. Yeah, this is Daniel. But do you see in this case, it's very interesting because here it's true that here we have a reference to the days, literal days, because Erev Boker, in this case, it is just a reference to the sacrifice, because in the evening and in the morning, in the temple or in the tabernacle, the sacrifice should be brought. And we have another principle. Of course, it means those days, yes, but this is the prophetic days. And the prophetic days means one day means 1 year. And we can see it from other parts of the Bible. Like, for example, from the same book of Daniel, we can see, for example, that when we have a prophecy about 70 weeks, it is clear that 70 weeks is not just 70 real weeks, but it is a reference for a more longer period of time. So we have the prophetic time, and the prophetic time, of course, is different from what is used in the book of Genesis, chapter 1. Mm-hmm.
No problem. No problem. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just thought that may be put as an exception to the rule. That's why I referred to context, because in Daniel the context is apocalyptic,
yes,
or is prophetic.
Now, one more thing, maybe we need to speak a little bit more about the evolution before we go to the next stage. So what I see, one of the main problems of all those theories about evolution is that they allow death to be before the fall. So because evolution involves death, the process of natural selection, the process of the survival of the fittest, is the main idea is that death should be present. And all those people who accept like theistic evolution, accept progressive creationism, they actually believe that death existed in the world from the very beginning. But of course, it contradicts to what is written in the Bible, because the Bible says that death appears in the world only after the fall. So before the fall, there was no death. And actually, this is one of the main issues why we cannot accept any of these theories. And of course, all those theories of creationism, or I mean progressive creationism, atheistic evolution, also emphasize another issue, that God is actually, how to say, they compromise the quality of God. So it means that God is not able to create everything in 6 days, or why should he use evolution as a tool for creation? And one more thing that I would like also to add about the evolution, that actually it is impossible to reconcile the idea of evolution with the idea of creation anyway. Even the order of the creation is not the same as the order of evolution. So we can see that the order is different, is distorted. So that is why we cannot see any parallels between them. Okay, so if you want to add anything else, so we can spend some more time on this, and we can go forward. Okay, let's continue. And now we need to come to the creation of man. And as I said already, the creation of man is the climax of the week of creation, because everything is created for man. So, later on we will speak about the difference between the ancient Near East accounts on creation and the biblical account of creation. And you will see that actually in the ancient Near East, man was created as something like a slave. So in many myths and many religions, men were just slaves in order to substitute gods when they walk and when they do something. But in the story of the creation of man, we can see that everything is created for man. And man is the one who should have a dominion in this world. And the creation of man, we can see that another formula is used to create a man. So if before God said, and God gave a command to the land, and land produced the plants, and he gave the command to the water. But now there is another formula, let us make a man. And only man is created, of course, in the image of God. And the verb bara is used 3 times in Genesis 1:27. And the description of the creation of man is longer than any other description of creation. And this phrase, let us make a man, of course, it provoked a lot of debates among the scholars, especially because it is related to the question of the Trinity. And there were many attempts to explain this phrase. Like, for example, somebody says that God speaks to creation, to heaven and the earth. Somebody says that this plural indicates divine majesty, but of course this idea is not native to the Bible, because in the Bible we do not have this plural of majesty. It appears in other languages and much later, but we cannot find it in the Bible. So in the Bible, if we use the Old English, people usually use thou to God, not you in plural to God, but only the singular forms, but not the plural forms. Thinking with oneself, but it also doesn't very logical. Appeal to the angels, but in this case it looks like God makes himself equal to the angels. And of course it could mean the conversation between the persons of the divine, of the persons of the Trinity. And we believe that this is a reference to the Trinity. There is a very interesting comment in Midrash Bereshit Rabbah, and how rabbis in their particular way explain this. According to the legend, when the prophet Moshe was writing the Torah from the mouth of the Most High, he stopped at the moment and asked, Lord, why do you say, let us make, if I know that you are one? Will not imperfect heads stumble on this? To this God answered his prophet, right. The one who is destined to stumble will stumble, but the smart people will ponder. So this is a very interesting rabbinic explanation. So they didn't explain anything, but they allow it to be like it is. So of course, this is the phrase, let us make, and some other phrase like this indicate to the Trinity, indicate to the plurality among divine persons. Okay, and one more issue that I would like to discuss today, if time allows, we can do even more. Discuss the idea of the image of God. And do you see there are two words that are used to describe the image of God. One is demut and another is tselem. So demut means a likeness, and tselem means image. So because two different words are used, there was a question, is this the same? So it is a kind of parallelism in Hebrew when the same issue is described with the different terms, or likeness and image are different issues. In Septuagint and Vulgate, there is a conjunction "and" between these words. And because of this, it seems that these words mean different concepts. However, the Hebrew text makes it clear that there is no significant difference between the two terms. So we can say that image and likeness is actually the same. And it is a kind of poetic language, and it means just like parallelism when the same issue is described with different terms. So how can we know that image and likeness are the same? So let us look at the usage of both terms. For example, in Genesis 1:26, both words are used. But in Genesis 27, only the word image is used. In Genesis 5:1, only the word likeness is used. And 5:3, two words, but in different order, is used. In Genesis 9:6, only the word image is used. So this interchangeable character of these words indicates that actually it is the same term. These are two terms, but they designate the same issue. So likeness to God, to be the image of God means to be like God. And if these words had different meanings, they would not be used interchangeably, as seen in these examples. So we can say that this is the same idea expressed by two different terms. Also, these words are used synonymously. There is a little difference in their meanings. The Hebrew word for image, tselem, comes from the root meaning to cut or to sculpt. So the same word is used for the idols that were cut off the wood or stones or something like this. Thus, this word can mean a sculptured image. The Hebrew word for likeness is demut, and it comes from the root to be like. Thus, in Genesis 1, the image is also a likeness. The two words together say that man is a representative of God on earth who in many ways resembles God himself. So I already mentioned that in Psalm 8, which is called lyrical echo to Genesis 1, 27, 28, and in this verse in Psalm 8, we can see that God is described as created a little bit lower to God himself. And in some of the translation, we can see that the translators try to a little bit play with this word in order to say that it is not God, but somebody else is in view there. But it is clear that when God created a man is supposed to be a little bit lower than God. So he is supposed to be the image of God. Another important issue is about, was the image of God, do we have the image of God after the fall? And there were many different views on this. Somebody said that the likeness to God remained, but the image was lost. Somebody said that the image and likeness was completely lost due to the fall. And somebody said that the image of God we still have the image of God. And the good explanation, the best answer to this question is written in Genesis 9:6. And this text is already after the fall. And here God prohibits to kill people, to kill man, because the man is still the image of God. So let us read this verse. Whoever sheds human blood, by humans his blood will be shed. For God made humans in his image. So the rationale or the reason why it is not permitted to shed blood is because a human is created in the image of God. So it means that the image of God still remains in humans even after the fall. But what we can say that the image of God like partially lost. So our image of God was distorted, was twisted in us because of the sin. Yes, Pastor Dion.
Professor, I just wonder whether, no, but I think that this statement that you have here answers that, and that is that we have lost that image of God, but he is still God reveres man because he made us to his image. It's not that he lost interest in the man because we lost his image, but it doesn't say that in verse 6 that we still have that image.
I understand, because the man was created in the image of God, but the text doesn't say that we still have the image of God. But do you see the rationale of the prohibition to kill is that man is created into the image of God. And if man completely lost the image of God, in this case, this reason would not be valid anymore. So that is why I think that this verse still says that we still have the image of God. But of course, it is true that our image of God is distorted. We cannot reflect perfectly the image of God as it was in the beginning. I would like to add a little bit more to that, because do you see, so there is a big question. There is a big question about why God destroyed the antediluvian world, the people before the flood, who lived before the flood. And I have just one answer to this question, because what happens to a person who continues to sin? So every time when we sin, we are losing we are losing the image of God. So because when we sin, when we do sin over and over again, the less of the image of God remains in us. And at some point of time, we can completely lose the image of God. And in this case, if a man completely loses the image of God, so he stopped being a man. So he became like an animal or something like this, because only people have the image of God, but all other creatures are not created into the image of God. So if we lose the image of God, we will be no better than just the animals. So in this case, I just use this explanation why God destroyed the first world. And my explanation is very simple. God destroyed the first world because those people completely lost the image of God. Of course, you can agree with me or you can disagree with me, but this is my explanation of the issues that happened during the flood, or why God gave the order to destroy or kill all the people who lived in Canaan. So my explanation is that they just completely lost the image of God in themselves. Okay, any other questions or any other comments?
So, we are talking about the likeness and image being using interchangeably, and sometimes we can say all these things are the same. So can we conclude that when the image was not fully lost, was not lost, even the likeness of God was not lost as well.
Of course, because they are used interchangeably, so we cannot say that that these are different ideas. So the same idea, but this idea is expressed by different words.
Thank you.
Yeah, one more verse, yes, is in James chapter 3, verse 9. And James says that with the tongue, yes, we bless our Lord and the Father, and with it we curse people who are made in the likeness of God. So it looks like James also says that this likeness of God or image of God, we still have it in ourselves. So we do not lose it completely, but when we sin, we are losing it. And the more we sin, the less of the likeness to God we have. Okay, any other issue that you would like to raise here?
Professor,
Oh,
yeah, sorry, please continue.
okay, thank you. No, I was going to say that to just show what you were saying, Prof, that these people, the antediluvians, had totally lost the image of God. In Genesis, it says that every imagination of the thought of their heart was only evil continually.
Yeah.
So these people were only thinking and only doing evil. So it's not like they were doing a lot of evil, but a little bit of good. It was just only evil, and it was continual. So it shows the total obliteration of the image of God.
Yeah.
There's an interesting term that Ellen White uses in education. She says, because of sin, the image of God in men was well nigh obliterated.
Oh, thank you for this
So
quotation.
yeah, so it suggests that the sin did a huge damage in terms of the image of God, but even though it did so much damage, it did not completely remove his image. And yeah, we praise God for that, because we can still respond to his grace and be able to experience salvation.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Pastor Dion.
Professor, I was just looking at Philippians 2, verse 6 and 7, where Paul was speaking about Jesus that didn't think it to be robbery to be equal to God, because he was in the form of God, the likeness of God. And then because and then in verse 7 he says, but he made himself of no reputation and also took on the form of a servant, to the likeness of men. So there's just, if we're talking about image, and then we look at Jesus and how does Jesus differ from us, because he was the complete likeness of God. He, that image of God was restored in him, and that's where I'm just thinking a little bit more about that. I think there's more to these two verses than meets the eye, but I still need to think about that.
Yeah, thank you very much for this verse. It's really a very interesting verse. So it's true that Jesus was he was like a second Adam, and because he was the second Adam, this is typology that Paul uses. So he was a perfect image of God. But I think that what Paul says here, he says about the human body of Jesus. So he took or assumed the human body, and because of that, he became like in taking the likeness of humanity, I think. And one more interesting verse, it is written in Genesis chapter 5. When Adam, when the son was born to Adam, Seth, it is said that Adam begot a son in his image. Yeah? Let us read it again. Adam was 130 years old when he fathered a son in his likeness, according to his image, and named him Seth. So do you see the children of Adam were not already the image, like the image of God and likeness of God, but they were image of Adam and likeness of Adam. So maybe this verse also says that like Adam, who is not a perfect image of God anymore, his descendants are also not the perfect image of God anymore, but they are in the likeness of Adam. Okay, yeah, and anything else? Can we move? Oh, there is one comment. Let me see.
No, Prof, I was just sharing the quote I had
Oh,
mentioned.
you shared the quotation. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. This is from the education. Oh, yeah.
Yes, Prof.
Thank you. Thank you very much for this quotation. I will just copy it. Okay, so we can move forward. And now I would like to discuss one more issue, which is also very, very important. So when we speak about the week of creation, this is our last slide, but I would like, I don't have written material about this, just oral presentation, but I would like to share with you my understanding of the Sabbath, or how can we understand the Sabbath better. And when we speak about the Sabbath, and this is also another climax of creation, but of course we cannot say that climax, we cannot put the climax on Sabbath, because climax is clearly put on the creation of man. So everything is for man, even the Sabbath, as Jesus says, is for man, not vice versa. Yes, but in this case, when we speak about the Sabbath, Sabbath is really very, very different from other days of creation. And first of all, this is the day when God created nothing. He just rested. And what is also interesting, that this day doesn't have a refrain. It was evening, it was morning, day 7. And this absence of the refrain is very, very significant in this case. And one more issue that we need to pay attention to is how the occupation of Adam is described in the Garden of Eden. Because when we read the account of Genesis 2 and verse 15 of Genesis 2, it says like this: the Lord God took the man and placed him in the Garden of Eden to walk it and watch over it. And now I would like to open the Bible, and let us see how it is written there. Vayikach Adonai Elohim et ha'adam. So Vayikach, it's from the root lakach, and he took, yes. And the Lord God took Adam, yes. And pay attention to this next verb. vayanichehu, vayanichehu. And this verb comes from the root. If you go down, you can see the meaning of the root is to rest, to rest. So this verse 2:15 is not translated, I think is not translated properly, because it's very difficult to convey the ideas that are there. Actually, this verb noch, this is the verb noch, and it is in Gefühl because it is used mostly in Gefühl. So this verb is also used, like, for example, if I do something, the hammer, and I just put hammer aside just to have a rest. So in this case, I also can use the same verb. So I rested the hammer, so I don't use it anymore. So I make it to rest. Yes, but I believe that anyway, the idea of rest is present in this verb, and the correct translation of the verb should be, and God took Adam and made him rest in the Garden of Eden. So, but the reason why many people do not accept this translation, because later on there are two another verbs, to walk on it and to keep it. So it looks like there is a contradiction here, because the man is supposed to rest in the Garden of Eden, but on the other hand, he also supposed to walk on it and to keep it. So what is also interesting, that the same words avad is used later on in chapter 3, when the occupation of man is described after the fall. So he had to toil the ground, and actually it is the same word avad. So he had to walk on the ground. So I believe for that reason, many people reject the idea that actually initial purpose of God was to make people rest in the Garden of Eden, to have a rest. So how can we explain this contradiction that we can see in this verse? So first of all, what I would like to say, and many scholars agree with this, that these two verbs, avad and shamar, are used together to describe the responsibilities of the priests and Levites in the sanctuary. So in this case, avad doesn't necessarily mean to walk, but it could also mean to minister. So the purpose of Levites and the priests was to minister in the sanctuary and to keep it, to protect it from the penetration of other people who are not authorized to go inside. And actually, probably you know that there are many articles were written about the Garden of Eden, that the Garden of Eden was also created as the sanctuary. So in this case, we can assume that the role of Adam in the Garden of Eden was the same as the role of a priest. So he is supposed to be a priest in the Garden of Eden. Of course, when we speak about the priesthood of Adam, we shouldn't understand it in the same terms as the priesthood after the fall. So probably the priesthood had different connotations and different ideas. But anyway, many scholars agree that these two verbs just indicate that Adam was a priest in the Garden of Eden. So now when we combine these two ideas, that God created a man, and the purpose of man was to rest in the garden. And the idea of Sabbath, that actually Sabbath doesn't have this refrain. There was evening, there was morning, day, 7. Okay, so we have a very interesting, we can stretch this idea and we can assume that actually this Sabbath rest was supposed to be never end. So do you understand? And one more idea that we can use in order to support this thing is that, do you see later on when we, you know that Canaan, the land of Canaan, is used very often as a symbol of the Garden of Eden. For example, in Genesis 13, when Abraham and Lot were supposed to divide their ways. And do you remember when Lot looked at this place, at Sodom and Gomorrah and those surroundings, he saw that it was like the garden of God, like the garden of God. This is written in Genesis 13, it seems to me, verse 8. So in this case, you can see that garden of the land of Canaan is always a symbol or type of the Garden of Eden or heavenly Canaan. And later on, we can see that the idea of rest in the land of, in the garden of, the idea of rest is very often associated with the idea of Canaan. Do you remember that Apostle Paul in the epistle to Hebrews says that Joshua was supposed to bring people to the rest, but he was not able to do this. So in this case, what is the meaning of the Sabbath? What are the, as I believe, true meaning of the Sabbath? Because sometimes we just say that the purpose of the Sabbath is to restrain from any kind of work and just to be in the rest. But I think that the true idea of the Sabbath is much deeper. And the true idea of the Sabbath, so do you see the Sabbath, the commandment to keep the Sabbath? We can find it already after the fall. And when God commanded people to keep the Sabbath, the text of the commandment refers back to the Garden of Eden or to the week of creation, because in 6 days God created heaven and earth and everything which is there, and on the 7th day he rested. And what is interesting, the same word Nuch is used to describe God's rest on the 7th day. So the main idea of Sabbath is to for people to remember how they lived, how they used to live in the Garden of Eden. So in other words, what God says in the 4th commandment, that man should work 6 days, but the 7th day they should live as in the Garden of Eden. So do you understand? So they should have a rest as people supposed to have in the Garden of Eden. So the true meaning of the Sabbath is to 1 day in a week to live like in heaven. And the text of the 4th commandment, I believe, is very revolutionary at that time, because the commandment prohibits work for all members of the household, even for the slaves, even for the animals. So everybody should have a rest. And at that time, I believe it was a revolutionary commandment, because at that time people used to have slaves. And do you see the idea of the 4th commandment is like this: if you have a slave, so he can be a slave only for 6 days, but on the 7th day he should live as in the Garden of Eden. And because in the Garden of Eden there was no slaves, so that is why he should be free. So this Jewish or Hebrew idea of slavery is like this. You can have a slave only for 6 days, but the seventh day he should be free, because this day he should live as in the Garden of Eden. And in the Garden of Eden, there was no slaves. And we can find the confirmation of this idea in the New Testament. For example, can you remember that in the Gospels, we can see that many times Jesus made miracles exactly on Sabbath. And one more interesting idea that we can notice about how Jesus made miracles on Sabbath is that he never asked people, do they have faith or not? So in other days, he can ask, do you believe in me, or something like that. But when he did miracle on Sabbath, he never asked people about their faith. It looks like he healed people unconditionally, even if they sometimes didn't believe in him or something like this. I will give you several examples. For example, do you remember, it seems to me this is Mark chapter 3, which speaks about the person who had a dry hand in the synagogue. So it was Sabbath, Jesus was in the synagogue. As soon as he saw a man with a dry hand, he asked him, go in the center. He went to the center and he said to him, stretch your hand. He stretched the hand and the hand became well. So do you see, he didn't ask him about his faith or anything like this. He just unconditionally healed him on Sabbath day. But probably the best example is John chapter 5, because in this chapter, he saw a man, Jesus saw a man in the pool of Bethesda, and the man was paralyzed for 38 years. And when when Jesus came to him, he asked him, do you want to be well? He said, of course, I want to be well, but definitely at that moment, this man didn't believe in Jesus, because he didn't know who Jesus was. So Jesus said to him, take your this coat or whatever, and walk. And he walked, and it was on Sabbath. And what is interesting, later on, when he met the Pharisees, and the Pharisees started to and the Pharisees said that it was his guilt, so he shouldn't do this on Sabbath. He actually immediately said, okay, it's not I who did this, but because this man told me, so I did this. So it looks like he blamed Jesus for healing him. So do you see, sometimes Jesus healed people on Sabbath, and he healed even those people who didn't show faith in him. And there is a question, why did do this? And there is also an impression that he did those miracles on Sabbath because every time when he did a miracle on Sabbath, there was a dispute with the Pharisees, and the Pharisees and the priests and some other officials tried to say that actually it is against the law to make the miracles or to make the healings on Sabbath, because they considered it as a kind of work. And in one case is especially important, because in this case Jesus reveals the reason why he is doing this, and it is written in the Gospel of Luke, chapter 13, and this is a story about a woman. The woman. Luke chapter 13. Yes, healing of the woman who also had sickness for 10 years. Let me read it. As he was teaching in one of the synagogues on the Sabbath, a woman was there who had been disabled by a spirit for over 18 years. She was bent over and could not straighten up at all. When Jesus saw her, again, he asks nothing. He just saw her. He called out to her, "Woman, you are free of your disability." Then he laid his hands on her, and instantly she was restored and began to glorify God. But the leader of the synagogue, indignant because Jesus had healed on the Sabbath, responded by telling the crowd, "There are 6 days when work should be done. Therefore, come on those days and be healed, and not on the Sabbath day." But the Lord answered him and said, "Hypocrites, doesn't each one of you untie his ox or donkey from the feeding trough on the Sabbath and lead it on to water? Satan has bound this woman, a daughter of Abraham, for 18 years. Shouldn't she be untied from this bondage on the Sabbath day?" So do you see, he refers exactly to the text of the 4th commandment, because the 4th commandment says that on the Sabbath day, everybody should set free for 1 day, at least for 1 day. And this was the spirit of the 4th commandment, that on this day, everybody should be free, because in the Garden of Eden, there was no slaves. Everybody was free at that time. So in this case, Jesus confirmed that he actually fulfilled the Sabbath commandment, because the Sabbath commandment says you should set free everybody who is not free. And he says that this woman who was tied by Satan for a long period of time, she wasn't free. She couldn't enjoy the rest of the Sabbath day because she is sick. She had a problem. So it was like an obligation to set her free. So in this case, how I understand the Sabbath, I understand that this Sabbath, the Sabbath commandment, tells us that actually 1 day in a week we should live as in heaven, as in paradise, and as in the Garden of Eden. And that is why we should have this complete rest in God. And also this Sabbath commandment, I believe it is still valid for all Christians, because it indicates not only to the past, but it indicates to the future rest that we will have when Jesus comes back. So this is how I understand the Sabbath. That Sabbath is a reminder for us about how we used to live, or how our ancestors used to live in the Garden of Eden. And this idea of rest, and you will see it is very, very important idea throughout our theme, throughout the scriptures. You can find it in many, many other places of the Holy Bible. So do you have any questions or any comments?
Yes, Professor.
Yes, please.
It makes me think of, on the Old Testament, there was also the Jubilee year, that after the seventh year, there was a year where all the slaves were completely set free. And then they were completely set free. And it's quite interesting that that Jesus, the verses that you just read, that he released them from being bonded by evil spirits. And I think that the same way that you mentioned, when Jesus comes, he will release us or set us free from the bond of sin caused by the evil spirits, that Satan caused us to sin, and he's keeping us bondage, and that the setting free will happen when he comes. So I think that is a future indication, and that was also part of the I don't want to say ritual, but the commandment that God said about the setting free of on the Jubilee year.
Yes, I agree with you. So we have the same pattern: 6 years, and the 7th year, the year when everybody should set free, all slaves should set free. And the Jubilee is also, and do you remember, it's also connected to the preaching of Jesus, because Jesus, when he started his first sermon in the synagogue, according to the Gospel of Luke, she proclaimed the Jubilee year. And the Jubilee year is the time when everybody should come, should be released, yeah, and the land should return to its owners. Yeah.
And in Daniel, when he wrote about that 7 sevens are given for you, so it means that the time that Jesus came was after the 7 sevens. He was the person that set them free.
Good idea. Thank you very much for this idea. Yes. 70 weeks. So 70 weeks. Yes. Of course, it's not related to Jubilee. It is not related to Jubilee because Jubilee is 50.
No, it's 10 sevens, but it says 7 sevens.
But 7 sevens, yes, correct. 7 sevens is 49, and 49 is exactly pointing to the
Jubilee.
To the Jubilee year. Yeah. Thank you very much. Yes, it's a good idea. Yeah, very, very good idea. Anything else?
Yeah, Prof. It's interesting what you are saying in relation to the Sabbath and it pointing to how we are to live. My mind has been spinning, connecting the points that you're connecting. But it made me think of, I don't know if I read it in Testimonies, Volume 6, where Ellen White brings an idea similar to that, but she says something like, when we keep the Sabbath as we should, we will keep all the commandments of God. I know that's not exactly what you were saying, but I think that the idea of the way that we should live on Sabbath being close as possible to the way that we would live in the Garden of Eden, then that would influence the way that we live on a daily basis.
Yeah, of course.
Because it's very difficult for you to live one way during the week, and then on the 7th day, you become something else. So I think it's something that one can really think about and meditate on.
Especially, do you see? I think about the children, because very often for children we make Sabbath the day they don't like, because of the restrictions, many restrictions. And I think that we need to think how we can make this day especially joyful for the children. And one more thing, do you see, comes to my mind, when, for example, do you see when we look at our watch and think when the Sabbath, and we are waiting to the end of the Sabbath to start doing some other things that we need to do. So in this case, we just testify that we do not like Sabbath. We do not pressure this time, and it means that we don't like the heavenly rest. So let us think about it, and let us try to keep this true, spirit of Sabbath, and this is the spirit of the Garden of Eden. Okay, so our time is came to the end.